see plenty of PowerPoints. But we will be taking notes and we'll keep track of the conversations that we have. Again, the purpose of this group is to have the CBO report out on certain items that we're working on, as well as hear from you all and in terms of how we can either improve our processes, policies, or any ideas that you have as we move forward. Again, I always feel like collective participation really helps us with making sure that we put our best programs forward and they work for most people. So jumping right into the agenda, Kristen sent this out last week. She's covering for Lauren Francis, who's out on vacation. But CPF, Capital Projects Funds, we made those announcements last week. The link is in the agenda. We're really proud that we allocated $113.5 million across 20 counties in our state. It was a very, very competitive grant program, and it was 5% oversubscribed. So, we were never going to have a ton of money in this program. And, in some cases, you can spend all of this money in one county. And so what I'm really happy to report is we had a good mix of applicants. Most of those receiving funds were industry. And we had a handful of local government, municipally owned broadband networks, not many. And then we had a couple of nonprofits, but the overwhelming majority of the funding went to private industry. Again, really happy and pleased with the public-private partnerships that are occurring in our state. A lot of the providers that were awarded were local. We don't have a local preference in our program. We're not really allowed to do that. It makes things complicated, but we were able to give most of our dollars to companies in Colorado, which is great. And so we think it was a successful run of the program. And again, the other allocation of funding, the governor's office is working on and applying it towards Ridgeview campus project. And that is, there's a couple different programs under CPF. Multi-use facilities is one of them. And so that's the program plan that the governor's office was proposing to use those funds for. So a lot of lessons learned during CPF, and each grant program that we do here at CBO and OIT, I feel like we get better and better. I know SLF was kind of our first trial run. CPF, other than maybe the technology glitch with the Zoom grants and some of the data challenges, I think overall we were able to accommodate folks by extending the deadline to give people more time to account for some of those. But I feel like overall the process was better than it keeps getting better. And so I know there was some changes in the guidelines in the middle of the program, but that was because we moved to fixed cost awards, which we think will benefit subrecipients as well as helps our workload at the state by not looking at every single detail. We have to look at every single detail, but we think from an administrative purpose perspective, it'll serve our stakeholders pretty well. So that's where we are with CPF. The challenge and appeals process is open. We ran that process right away as soon as we posted those awards. So the funds that we have allocated are pending the outcome of the appeals and challenge process. Now, this is something that we do in the Broadband Deployment Fund with our applications. So our partners, our industry partners, should be pretty familiar with the post-award process. And so we scrubbed our data quite a bit ahead of the program, and we continue to scrub the data, which is in the maps. So hopefully the challenges are pretty straightforward for CPF. So that's where we are with CPF. We expect to have all of those subrecipients, under contract this quarter. So we want to make sure that we get everybody under contract, get their grant agreements approved and executed so that they are up and running for the construction season. I know it's pretty cold outside and we always kind of forget, but construction season is right around the corner, and we want to make sure that folks have money in hand to go out and start deploying broadband across the state. So that's where we are with CPF. Again, if anything changes with CPF on awards or anything like that, obviously we'll let stakeholders know, but we feel pretty good about the $113.5 million we were able to allocate. Most of those, all of the grant awards at this point are fiber to the premise, fiber to the home. So we are definitely achieving the commitments we made to Treasury. We committed 18,000 locations. We awarded nearly 19,000 locations. So we did meet those requirements per Treasury. So we'll wrap that program up and get into execution mode on those agreements here pretty soon. We do have a model template for CPF. I know some of you guys who are used to us in previous grant cycles. We have a model template, so it should be much easier to work with our contracts team to make sure you have the latest and greatest. Again, sometimes we have to make updates to those agreements based on Treasury guidance. So that's always a given in these programs. It seems like we're always having to make amendments based on federal guidance. So hopefully that slows down eventually, but that's always something that occurs. But we'll give people plenty of notice if that happens. The NTIA, moving on to the NTIA, they approved volume 1 of our initial proposal last week, and we are on track for our challenge process, which we sent out a notice. If you're on our listserv, we sent out a notice this afternoon announcing that. So the schedule and everything, the timeline is in that email. Staff did a pretty good job of laying out the details for that program. We feel like this is kind of our last chance to perfect the national broadband map before we go into BEAD. And so, we encourage a lot of participation in this program because what the result of this program will be the locations that are going to be eligible for BEAD funding. And so we want to perfect those maps, make them accurate. So we're looking for community and ISPs and nonprofits and the folks that can obviously make the challenges, but we're looking for folks to make challenges to the national broadband map. And so we can get those approved by the NTIA before we open up our grant process. Couple of questions. Ralph, when will the map data related to the CPF grants be available? If you're talking about the actual locations that we funded, all of that is on our Capital Projects Funds website. There's a CSV file with all of the data there so that people can challenge it. So you can look at our website. So in the initial proposal, volume 1, to get approval, the CBO stripped away almost all of the pre-challenge modifications. We were only looking at DSL modifications. And if I'm being honest, the pre-challenge modifications were pretty much a moot point by the time we got approval. So the clock got run down on some of those ideas. We made it more straightforward. The NTIA really probably just wanted us to do DSL from the beginning. So we just wanted to get it approved so that we could move forward with our process. But we still believe that, having accurate data is really important, and we strive to do that. The challenge process is open and available for folks. Initial proposal volume 1 and 2, the public comment summary. I know we get asked quite a bit when we're posting the public comment summaries. We're going to post that by the end of January. So that'll be posted for both volumes. The reason why we decided to do it at the same time, because volume 1 and volume 2 work together. And so we wanted to make sure that everybody had a comprehensive view of all the comments and not splitting them up so that things don't get taken out of context and so forth, and maybe just to help with any sort of confusion because there's two separate public comments for summaries for both volumes. So we're going to do that by the end of the month. It'll be on our BEAD website, Advanced BEAD website. It'll be a summary. It won't be verbatim of what everybody said and who said it, but per section, per requirement in the volumes, we will have that for people to review. For volume 2, just specifically, staff turned that in to the NTIA mid-December. We haven't heard anything back on it. I think it's still under review. And so once we receive the comments back from the NTIA, we'll start incorporating those comments. we were able to take a lot of feedback and put it in volume 2. So we incorporated that. And so we're excited about doing that. Hopefully the NTIA is okay with that. If not, we'll have to strip some of that stuff out of there, but we have to stick to their model template. There is a very rigid template for these volumes. So we'll do our best to accommodate public comment where we can. I know there was a lot of questions around the criteria and changing the criteria. We can't change the criteria. There's a primary and secondary criteria. Other than a few items that we added, the criteria is prioritized the way it's prioritized per the NTIA. So that's just an example of where we didn't have a lot of flexibility. BEAD project areas, high cost per location. So in our grant guidelines, I wanted to engage this group to see what your thoughts were on this. So we have to, as part of our volume 2 and requirement 8, we have a pretty robust timeline of when certain activities are supposed to happen under BEAD. One of those being the public comment, the development of project areas and high cost areas, and our grant guidelines. Those 3 things pretty much kick off the process for our application. And we're going to work on those. We have a kickoff meeting here, I think next week or the week after, to start developing those areas, this information for public comment. And want to know, what type of engagement, this committee would like to see on some of those ahead of public comment. Again, we're moving really, really quickly in the broadband space on all these programs. So we don't have the luxury of a lot of time, but we definitely want to use this group to kind of think about what we do as a baseline for our grant program, if you will. And I know there was a comment about, not from this group, but maybe others, about using census block data. We census block data, just so you guys know, is the baseline for how we're going to develop project areas. We know at the CBO that we're going to have to make adjustments to census block areas based on existing infrastructure in the field. But the government uses census blocks to allocate funding for a lot of programs. And so does the state. And so it's not a foreign concept. I think for infrastructure in particular, it doesn't quite follow the lines perfectly, but where we can make tweaks to the census blocks, we definitely want to engage stakeholders on that. So just want to kind of, maybe I'll stop right there and see what the group's thoughts are on that, and then I'll keep moving forward. Was there a question in the chat? When will eligible locations for BEAD funding be publicly available? All right, hold on. Sorry, I'm going to go back up. Okay. So now that volume 1 is approved, do you know when it will be released publicly? It's already released. It's on our website. When will the eligible locations for BEAD funding be available? They were just made available an hour ago. So thank you, Kristen, for including those links. Very, very helpful. Thank you, Judd, for that as well. So great. So with that being said, does anybody have any initial thoughts on engaging this group in the development of project areas, high cost areas? The grant guidelines, yes, a lot of that is boilerplate. Again, working with the NTIA, there's pretty much a format, but on the process side, there might be some opportunities to engage as well. Thanks, Ralph. Anybody have any other thoughts?
So the volume 2 has some detail about how you propose to arrive at those thresholds, and the fact that multiple thresholds would be anticipated depending upon geography.
That's right.
So, it will be dependent upon what you're using as your base data for that in terms of what you have to estimate cost in particular regions and geographies. So I don't know how much existing data you have to draw on for that. So absent that, it's a little hard to make specific recommendations, but.
Okay. Yeah. So, so here's where we are with the data. So we don't, you're right. We don't have, in particular, the high cost data, right? So we're doing cost estimation based on existing grant programs. So the Broadband Deployment Fund Board, we have some pretty good data there, and that's really recent. And then, NTIA has some toolkits for establishing high cost as well, those high cost areas. We're also in the process of purchasing a database, a data source for high cost area estimation as well. And so we have a couple of data sources that we're going to pull together. And because we just feel like, depending on which data source, it might be a little bit different from others. So we want to do a kind of a good cross comparison. And so what maybe, and to Jeff's point, what we can do, if you guys want, it sounds like there's some desire to see what we're working on. And we can certainly, when we get to the point where we actually have some pretty good drafts of what we're thinking about as far as project areas and high cost areas, we'll present that to this group and get your reactions. And we'll send it ahead of time so you have time to look at it before the meeting, of course. But if you guys are okay with that approach, we can certainly move forward with that in mind and keep you guys in mind as before we roll it out to the public. It's not after, it's before we roll it out to the public. Is that okay to everybody? Can I get some thumbs up or some yeses, yays, nays?
Sure, sounds fine.
Okay, Eric?
Yeah, it sounds fine to me too. Just philosophically, knowing that you'll have more detailed data that might be forthcoming. Philosophically, with BEAD, I mean, would you be looking at the hardest to get to, however you determine those high cost addresses, as the first to try to hit, or as the last, or somewhere in the middle? I know when we involve industry, oftentimes still trying to make money, and so it just generally automatically kind of focuses them on, well, what's left as far as the higher density areas that we could actually make a profit from, that to keep our operations going. But then what that has typically done in the past is left those hardest to reach areas out. So is it more of an REA model like it was 100 years ago, where we're just trying to get to even the ones that absolutely aren't going to ever pay for themselves, or are we trying to do something in the middle? Has there philosophically been discussions with BEAD, or I know they want to hit everything, but I also know we're all trying to be realistic of what's possible too. So even with 828 million, it's not necessarily enough to hit every single address.
Right. No, I mean, those are good points. Yeah. So the NTIA has really spelled out the priorities, Eric. We fund the unserved first, then we fund the underserved second. And if we have any other monies, we can allocate it to other programs that are qualified under the BEAD program. We will not have discretionary money left over. I really truly believe that it'll take all of the 826 million to get to universal coverage. Universal coverage is going to be really challenging, even within the fixed wireless space. It's really difficult. And, when we did our analysis last year, some of the passings were up in the upwards of 120 to 150, 180,000 per passing. And so the reality is we're going to have to get really creative in what we submit to the NTIA for approval. And it's not necessarily based on an ROI model, the NTIA. That's not like how they're prioritizing this program. They're not prioritizing what makes money first. Because, in theory, philosophically, a lot of the locations that are being served, the ROI was there. So that's why we're here. And so, you know, so that's our approach for BEAD. And honestly, when you look at the programs that the CBO and Broadband Deployment Board have been funding, you know, a lot of this is unserved and underserved locations. And so, you know, the costs are, you know, the cost modeling is really, you know, up to the ISP. And so, and with the federal subsidy, the theory is that if you're being subsidized, that then it'll pencil out, right? Because we're buying down that upfront infrastructure, so it makes it more affordable over the long term.
But
Is that perfect? No, it's not a perfect approach. It's not a one size fits all approach.
So I think, yeah, I was going to say, I think to follow on from what Eric is saying, there's a question about sustainability, right? So there's a question about funding areas where perhaps there isn't a sufficient revenue to make it a sustainable business, in which case you're not going to have success, right? Because you just can't maintain the business. And so funding those areas raises a big question. And I think so I think for the question to get at is the maintenance and sustaining cost of the business a factor in making these determinations?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. In the initial proposal, volume 2, you know, and in the criteria, sustainability and network operations and sustainability, OpEx is just as important as CapEx in our review criteria. And so, you know, it's really important. And I know it's challenging because we also have the affordability requirement as well. And so, you know, I think what's ultimately going to end up happening is, you know, CBO is going to have to work really closely with our providers on what this looks like. How does it get implemented? And there's going to be probably some conversations with the NTIA about what's the reality of universal coverage when you have less than $1 billion in BEAD money. And so, you know, and hopefully in the spirit of being creative, when we're looking at our extremely high cost areas, we approach those with the logic of, hey, we would love to have fiber everywhere, but the reality is these folks will likely not have fiber based on where they are. And so how do we look at other technologies that bridge the gap that are less costly? And that's how we'll have to draw those project areas. The one thing though with the high cost areas is, you know, we're going to really pay attention to what I would call like the artificially high cost areas to get, because we might have some projects that come in $2-3 million over what they really are, just to get at that high cost qualification, that area. So we have to pay attention for that. So it's like, so that the costs that we know in our cost estimation, that we get the accurate picture for that area versus kind of just relying on anecdotal data, where we think it's 3 million, but it's actually 1 million to build. But because we're getting funding, it's going to be 3 million. So it's a balance, and I don't know where the balance ends up, but we will definitely look at that when we open up our application process.
Yeah, it's a multivariate optimization problem.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, if you think about the problem you're trying to solve, this problem is I wouldn't say impossible, but it feels impossible sometimes, you know. So but we'll get there.
Yeah.
Yes, and speaking on the sustainability part of it, and I know it might be quite challenging for the industry to provide it, but what about the customer? And I know there are some standards in volume 2 that gives more points to a provider who can provide service for less than 100 a month or less than 70 or 50, whatever the numbers are. Is there any, I guess, methodology to whether that stays the same, or if a provider can increase that price later, and what that might mean to consumers in those areas?
Yeah, so the price point is always a tricky thing for the NTIA, the NOFO, and we got clarification on this. You know, the pricing that's required is for the period of performance for the grant. You know, it's not like permanent, I guess you could say. We actually did get some feedback, and Judd, I don't know if I have that right. I think that's correct, but also like you know, there was some consideration for uh, uh, in escalations in price to account for inflation. So, you know, if we have $100 per price cap per month, does that account for inflation? And so that was a comment that we received in our volume 2. And so we're looking into that. And I think, go ahead, Jeff.
No, Brent, I didn't want to interrupt. I just had a follow-up clarification question.
Okay. But Sandra, yeah, I mean, that's something that's of interest to the broadband office. You know, affordability is a barrier to adoption. And so, you know, where we can try to get there with some of the federal funding, it's going to be a long-term issue with just broadband in general. And broadband isn't unique in this space. All of our utility bills are going up. So, you know, it's just really challenging. And hopefully, you know, we can come up with programs that really help with that affordability side over the long term for those that need it. I hope that answers your question. Judd, do you have something?
Let me get back. Sorry, I was on a different page. Yeah, we did get a couple comments on that, on the variability over time. You know, how do we adjust for inflation, for costs, for supply chains, for everything else? So one thing you might see in the new volume 2 when we publish that is we would base that off of it. I was just trying to look up the name of it. The FCC comes out with a what the average cost of different service levels are, and we would base it off of that. So and those are automatically adjusted for inflation, for supply chain, for costs and things like that. So that was a good suggestion that came in through the comments, and we'll adjust it to base it off of something like that.
Yeah, and I was actually asked that question today at JBC, Judd.
Oh.
And I mentioned the same thing because it was what about affordability and
yeah.
In the original, the volume 2 that we put out, you know, it was just a starting place for ideas, and that was one idea that we thought that was pretty great. And it was already established. It's already established, so yep. We're all using the same. We're all working off of the same tables at this point, and not something different.
Thanks.
Brandy and Judd, you actually just answered my question. I was going to ask about following up what happened at JBC and just clarify what was said this morning, because I couldn't listen in, but I heard about it. But Judd, you answered my question. Thank you.
Great. Go ahead, Eric.
This is kind of just a follow up, and it's kind of tangential to that discussion. But if you do start with unserved as in the initial, whether it's fixed wireless or whether it's fiber, either way, you've got to get close enough to actually, via some delivery method, get the internet to those unserved locations, which are normally unserved for a reason, mostly because they're really, really far from existing infrastructure. I would think that, and we've had this discussion before, it might be good to start to gather the available leasable fiber assets that are going to get you kind of close to a lot of these locations, maybe even to include microwave infrastructure, which is normally proprietarily owned, that you could actually build a fixed wireless solution from. There's a lot of ways to get to these unserved locations becomes very much a middle mile problem, which I know that you've had a discussion with us here in the Southwest of being one of our primary concerns. But that's going to be anywhere that you have those unserved locations. And as you start to figure out how to build to them, addressing that middle mile access is going to be pretty paramount, I think. Perhaps even to include some interaction with existing providers that have large distributed fiber networks that are right now not accessible to us for use as governmental or open fair market value lease. I'm talking specifically about our OPTIC that we have here in the majority of Colorado. In our area, if we could get access to that, most of our unserved, suddenly become within several miles of accessibility versus maybe dozens, if not 60 miles. I know they have additional assets that are available that were built as part of Connect America Fund, and they generally don't lease them to just any government or alternative provider, but they're also not planning on using those for anything other than their own internal purposes. So much of which was built with public money. So those are some discussions that I think could get you a lot closer to getting to that end goal.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, the middle mile is just a critical component, and it's something that we are looking at the state. We made a pretty good pitch today to the Joint Budget Committee to establish the program. And then we're looking at expanding through legislation the uses in the high cost support mechanism funds to account for more middle mile, because we just don't have any funding for it. And so, and all of our programs are last mile, which, it's chicken and the egg. You can't have one without the other. Which one comes first in my mind is middle mile, but we decided as a country we're funding last mile. So, I think we as a state have to fill in the gaps. And I think that was pretty clear from the NTIA's message on middle mile. And then also we're looking to expand uses for other technology that isn't eligible for any funding, really, like, satellite. I mean, there's technologies for those that are way out in the middle of nowhere, and they're just never going to get fiber. I mean, just to be honest, I just don't know how it happens in a network that you have to make sure that you can afford. So we're looking at all of that, and more to come on that as well. So I'm going to keep moving along. Our BEAD challenge process is underway. Like I said, we sent out notification today. We are going to have webinars, office hours on this, on specific items. So if you have specific questions on how this is going to work, and the timelines and the data, our mapping team is going to set up a series of meetings and webinars to help our stakeholders through this process. We will start accepting challenges on Wednesday the 10th, so this Wednesday. And again, we're going to provide a lot of support to our ISPs and local governments and nonprofits for this. Now, individuals can't submit challenges, but individuals can work through their community to submit challenges. So, so that's where we are with the BEAD challenge process. The high cost support mechanism calendar. Just wanted to give you guys a quick update. We're running our last grant cycle under this for the Sunset Review. And so we have about just over $14 million to allocate, which is great. And then once we get through this legislative session, keeping our fingers crossed on some of the proposals that we proposed, we'll be able to have a new version or a new version of the high cost support mechanism program that allows for different types of uses that aren't eligible for funding where we see gaps. And so again, with Sunset Reviews, it's always good to look at our programs and see and make sure that they're evolving with the current state of broadband and the future state of broadband. So we think the proposal in front of our stakeholders is a good one. And again, we do hold regular stakeholder session meetings. Like again, I said, last time that we found this to be pretty successful with our legislative agenda last year. And so we want to include your thoughts on those as we move that piece of legislation along. So the broadband deployment, yeah, I already talked about that, the Sunset Review. Paige, are you on the call? Is Paige on here? I don't think Paige is on here, is she? No? Okay.
No.
Well, you have, okay, that's okay. Well, please join our stakeholder calls. Again, we restructured the high cost support mechanism program into 2 tiers with existing resources. Those 2 tiers, one includes specifically last mile or traditional last mile program. The other tier includes other items like pole attachments, pole replacements, which I know are a significant challenge for industry in our co-ops, middle mile infrastructure, some digital equity. We don't really have a lot of parameters around that yet, but we want to be able to at least have the ability to fund, programs that help connect folks directly to the internet. Don't have any ideas around the affordability piece yet. I'm not hopeful that we're going to see a reauthorization of the Affordable Connectivity Program, so that'll fall back to the states to figure out. Currently, there's about $7 million of investment that has occurred in the ACP for Colorado, which includes, I think it's 300,000 households. So that's a significant impact to our state, to our providers, to our community. So I think it'll be very devastating to not have that renewed, but it just means we have to go back to the drawing board and figure out as a state how we deal with that. And so as far as our broadband legislative stakeholder meetings, like I said, we have the next one scheduled at Wednesday at 1 p.m. And we're also filling out, we're also requesting that our stakeholders fill out a survey for the Broadband Deployment Fund. Again, we want to reach a really wide audience and collect ideas to help inform our legislative agenda, this initiative. So I encourage you to fill it out. If you haven't filled it out already, the link is in the agenda. And so, and if you have any distribution lists that you are responsible for, if you could send that out, and maybe in some of your communication, again, we want to collect as much input as possible before we wrap up the drafting of that bill. So far, so good on the bill. There seems to be consensus that this program does need to continue. There's a little bit of a difference between what the PUC and DORA came up with versus what we're coming up with. But I think by the end of the legislative session, we'll incorporate, consolidate those bills into one and make it work for our program. So that's all of the updates that I have. So just a few reminders. Again, we send these notes out. We did include notes from last week's meeting. But staff, is there anything that anybody wants to add to the conversation? So yeah, 240,000 households. Thanks for that, Kristen and Sandra. Is there anything that anybody else wants to add or have any thoughts on?
I was just kind of thinking about the alternatives like satellite, for instance, which is, from what I've read, is extremely expensive. How in the world would that be sustainable if, we can't sustain fiber? I know fiber is expensive at the onset, but is substantially lower than providing satellite service to those high cost areas going forward. So
yeah, satellite is pricey for sure. And it's obviously more expensive than our, affordability standards that we have at the CBO and in the federal government. It's not eligible for federal funding. Right. So, we can't use federal funds to subsidize it, but there might be an opportunity through state dollars. And again, based on need to provide vouchers for the initial upfront equipment purchase. Very similar to ACP, we provide vouchers for devices. That's something that the state could look at doing for satellite as well. And so, it's just an idea. And it's something that we've done in other programs that have helped connect people. So there's possibilities there. As far as the ongoing monthly cost, that's a whole nother analysis we'd have to conduct. But just for the sake of the conversation, easy win is like, here's a voucher to go purchase a satellite, Starlink satellite. Other issues it's a do-it-yourself project. So it relies on the user being able to set it up. So, it's not just the device itself, it's education on how to set it up. But it could be an option for those that they're just not going to get fiber.
Yeah, we haven't seen the economies of scale and what the marginal costs are for additional subscribers as that business scales up. So I think it's still early days on price.
Yeah, I agree.
We tried to address that during COVID when Starlink was first coming out, and we were trying to figure out how to get some of our remote students that couldn't come to school. That was a problem for them because there's no way that, giving them a cellular hotspot, which was the solution for a lot of school districts, just wasn't really very effective for them because they didn't have cellular, or at least cellular data in the levels that would allow them to do video classroom activities. And I talked to the Starlink representatives at the time, that was, back in 2020, to see if they were part of the what was the name of the program before the ACP? It was the one that was before that was named, but they couldn't be part of it because that would only apply to entities that had existed before they had actually launched their first satellite. So it's like, yeah, but it's the best solution that we have now to actually get to the students. And so, yeah, from a rural community standpoint, it's been a boon since then as far as filling in the gaps, and I think it will continue to while we try to build out the infrastructure. But affordability is always going to be an issue with the satellite. It may come down some, but I'm guessing it won't come down to the levels of even some of the lower tiers of the fiber connectivity, maybe ever. But if it does, there is some concern that it will be able to keep up with the base standards of connectivity, because it's not quite as scalable as quickly as fiber is. It's better than the old fixed satellites that were only launched every 10 years or so. But since they're constantly launching these micro satellites up there, but it's not. It's a great fill in the gap solution, and I think it's been utilized already by people that can afford it. But it isn't going to be a replacement for permanent infrastructure.
That's right. Yeah, no, I agree, Eric. I think it's not a replacement for, fiber in the ground or fiber on a pole, and scalability is, to be determined. And it's not, it's for the people that can afford it, they'll have it. But where I think the state could really maybe think about filling in the gap for those that can't afford it is providing a subsidy to get it, which could be helpful, again, based on need. Because there's obviously some people that can afford it, and that's good for them. But yeah, I think over time we'll see how the satellite impacts the market, and see if we see some trends in rural Colorado around it. I know I've talked to some rural people, and they have satellite, and it's working really well for them. But again, there's challenges with every technology even fiber to some degree as well. So we'll be paying attention to that and seeing if we can look at some best practices for how to leverage that technology to fill the gap. Does anybody else have any other things that they want to bring to our attention?
Wendy, is there a separate group that does the digital equities stuff, or is that something done with the Advanced Concert Group as well?
Yeah, so the digital equity groups are managed and run by the Office of Future of Work. Melanie Coletti does that work. And so I think I've sent you her contact before, Sandra. So if
I do have it. I just wasn't sure whether it was covered. Okay.
Yeah, there's two groups that are doing that work. We have a bigger stakeholder committee and a smaller stakeholder committee, and they're focused on different aspects of the work. And so just an update on that. We are wrapping up our digital access plan. We don't call it the digital equity plan. We call it the digital access plan. And we're going to have that available in March for. We'll have the final draft available in March.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Randy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much. Our region really benefit from CPF, and so appreciate your focus in our area and our region, which will benefit not only users but redundancy too as well. So thank you very much for looking into our region.
Well, you're welcome, Commissioner Salka. You know, you guys, you know, with all the CPF awards, it was just so competitive, and I wish we could have funded all of them because there were so many great projects out there, but we just ran out of money. And I'm just really happy you guys put a really great application forward. The best applications got the funding, and so, you know, obviously that demonstrates the capabilities in your region to fill out these grant applications and do a really good job. So thank you for participating, and we look forward to some ribbon cuttings at some point.
Definitely.
Year, so.
You all will be included, and it's even engaged in conversations on expanding the Southern Indian Tribes Network too as well with Wapata County funds. So great news, and so thank you all.
Yep, no problem. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I wanted to echo what Matt said, but on that, and it was really one of my questions for this meeting was going to be if you had a timeline for that, which you answered in your initial statements about when you hope to get the contracts in place. I think if that's the timeline that's you're really going to be able to keep, I think it kind of makes my question or recommendation moot a little, because I think that will be probably quickly enough for everyone to get to their real construction season. But especially if it drags out a little bit, I wondered if there was some way that you could even kind of differentiate between the counties of higher latitudes that tend to have a even shorter building season than the ones that are potentially able to do it longer into the season, if not the whole year round. There's a few places in Colorado that might be able to do that, particularly in the desert regions. But particularly in some of the mountain towns, you're really talking about a 5 or 6 month building season. If the contract wasn't able to be completed till September or October, then you're really talking about summer 2025 before anything can really commence. So it'd be lovely to see a lot of stuff start this summer, and I'm sure you guys are looking forward to that too.
Yeah, I mean, that's our plan, Eric. You know, and so, you know, we've been working pretty diligently on our contracting process at OIT. I know, you know, it was a little rough a couple years ago, and where it would take, you know, maybe a year to get one done. And so we've staffed where we built capacity around it. Everybody at OIT knows that this is a huge priority. Everybody's excited about it. And we actually have timelines for contracts now, versus kind of like, hey, we'll get to it when we get to it. Great people over at OIT though. I mean, they're working really hard on all things Colorado, but you know, just competing priorities. But we have allocated resources to staff up around that. And with our template, Judd's helped us with our template. Allie's helped us with our templates. So it should be pretty seamless, knock on wood. If you, you know, if you're not, you know, the templates are the templates, so we can't really make changes to any of it, but where the scope of work and the budget and timelines are in those contracts, those are where we kind of, we sharpen our pencil there and make sure they're final so that we can get them going and executed. So our goal is to turn around contracts within, I think it was 45 days or something like that. But that also depends on folks in the field too. So I know a lot of folks are motivated though, so I don't anticipate any delays on our our sub-recipients part. But yeah, we're trying to move quickly. The good news is we have until the end of 2026 to spend these funds. So I don't want to default to that though, because you know I don't want to get lazy on our deadlines. But we're not in a pinch, but our goal is to at least spend or obligate $60 million before the end of our fiscal year at the state. So we'll definitely do that with people's help as well. So yeah, we're tracking on that. We want to get these dollars out in community as quickly as possible. Does anybody else have any other questions, comments, ideas, all of that? Again, you know, we just wanted to create a space for a more focused conversation around what we're doing. Next meeting, we'll have some updates on our challenge process and how that's going. We'll also have updates on how we're moving forward with CPF and our contracts. Again, our appeals and our challenge process will be completed in February, so we'll be finalizing that program. We'll have more updates on our high cost support mechanism program. And so, again, make sure you fill out the survey if you haven't filled out the survey, and join us for our stakeholder calls. But
Brandy, I have one item. I'm just curious. You said today you presented to JBC.
I did. Mm-hmm.
Is there any, and we can talk about this off air, but any assistance you need to reach out to those JBC members in support for your initiatives?
It's up to you, Commissioner. I think, the proposal's on the table. So, obviously the CBO supports our initiative. And so, and a lot of the support, a lot of that, the proposal itself for the Middle Mile program was an effort. It was a culmination of a lot of things. When we went out and did our road show, our summit, the last couple years has just been collecting feedback. And so we tried to incorporate as much of the feedback as possible into that proposal. Like what are people's pain points? And so, yeah, I encourage you to look at the proposal and, figure out, I mean, obviously we can't tell you to go lobby the state legislature, but
well, as you very well know, I'll be doing that. So I might as well do a couple others.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And, so yeah, I mean, the Middle Mile program, obviously, we're really excited about it. So, and it was pretty well received today. But I also know, people put on their game face in budget season, and so the vote is the thing that matters. But, we got a lot of really great questions from Senator Bridges as well, in the committee itself. And so I think, from our perspective, just having a program that somebody can contact for Middle Mile would be great for the state instead of having to contact 3. And really trying to improve the process. We're really committed to that. It takes a lot of effort because there's just different actors and players involved. But we think this program is the beginning of righting the ship on Middle Mile.
Great, appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Does anybody have anything else? We're about 5 minutes out. All right. Okay. Well, as always, we really appreciate the time you guys take to hop on these calls. Your ideas are very important. Your feedback's very important to us. And, 2024 is going to be a really big year for Colorado in broadband. So we're going to be really busy working with you all and implementing these really important programs. So, again, I appreciate all your support of the CBO. And if you have any questions in the meantime, just let us know. We're always available. And we'll definitely reconvene next month and we'll have even more updates. So, and we'll engage you guys on the process for project areas and high costs and so forth. So that was good feedback. I look forward to working with you guys. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your week and take care. We'll see you next month, or sorry, two months from now, I guess. All right. Bye-bye. See you later.
Thank you.